To show you how to take a pretty standard DIY portrait shot and turn it into something that looks a little bit more, maybe not necessarily high fashion, but a little bit crisper and more artsy. And that's what you're going to do in your lesson today. So I took a couple pictures of Mr. Vetter in the classroom. I used a DIY situation just like you guys would at home. I turned the lights off and then I put sort of a high-powered can light on the side of him. I made the background a little bit more interesting by putting up some stacked up chairs in the classroom behind him. And I'm kind of using sort of the architecture of the space and the structure of that space to make it an interesting shot. And of course, he's also wearing his mask for safety. And also, I thought, it's sort of the sign of the times, so it might be interesting to see him in the mask. So I'm going to go ahead and take this photo that I took and dump it right into Photoshop. My tutorials, I'm really going to be using Photoshop, and then you're going to try them in Photopea. And if there's any inconsistencies or things that you can't find in Photopea that are in Photoshop, just let me know. But I think it's a lot of work for you guys to watch 2 tutorials, so I'm just going to kind of skip that. All right, so first thing we always do is make a duplicate layer of our master. And I like to call it the working copy. So a couple things around how I took this shot that I think are important, and things that you will probably encounter when you're shooting with your cameras in a DIY situation. There wasn't much light in this shot. Even this can light seems really bright, but it wasn't bright enough to really help me with my light meter and getting a correct exposure. So I'm hand holding this camera. I do not have a tripod, so I had to go at least 1/60th of a second. And I also had my aperture wide open at 4.5, and I had to bump my ISO way up to 1600, which is going to make this shot pretty grainy when you zoom in. But I had to do these things. So like I tried to get a tight focus right on his eye, but because my ISO is at 1600, it's really kind of a grainy shot. So it's as focused as it's going to be. But for the purposes of this demo, and also knowing it's probably just going to be a photo that I post online or something that is not going to get printed really big, it's okay. And these are just the compensations we have to make for the situations that we have. So that being said, I took this shot and it was still a little dark. Now I couldn't go any faster in the shutter because I would lose light and it would be even harder to capture information. And I also I didn't really want to add more light because I wanted it to be a dramatic shot. He's got the mask on. We're sort of working as teachers in these classrooms by ourselves. And I wanted to capture kind of the ominous nature of it. So I really like the can light. I like this line that it's kind of casting, which is, I think, really cool. And I also love the shadows of the chairs in the background and how they're kind of stacked up, sort of representing, you guys aren't here right now, and so everything is kind of on hold. So, and he's got the mask on. I just think it's an interesting shot. But I need to make some adjustments to make it a better shot. And so how do I do that in Photoshop? Well, we've got our adjustments panel up here, so you can see I clicked on that and I have these adjustments. We haven't really gone over these too much. This is light and dark. This is color and some other interesting things around color. And then here we have some fades, details we could do with fades. Brightness and contrast, levels, which is your value, your histogram from light to dark. This is called curves, which is a little bit more advanced way to adjust your levels. And so on and so forth. I'm not going to go into all these things. But what I would like to see you do is turn a photo that you've taken that has a lot of interesting positive and negative space and something that has potential to be a nice black and white photo with a lot of highlights and a lot of shadows. So I think this photo works for that. So the first thing I'm going to do to the photo is I'm going to adjust its saturation and I'm going to make it black and white. So I've clicked on the hue saturation icon here, adjustment layer, and I'm going to pull my saturation down to -100. So I've basically taken all the color out of the photo, and now I have a black and white photo. So before I make any adjustments with levels and light and dark and values and all that, I want to make it black and white first. Okay, so I want you to look at your layers. So now our adjustment levels or layers kind of go in over on the very top of our layers. So you can see that this is the top layer of our photo. So the next thing I want to do is work with the levels. So I'm going to go in and click levels, and then you can see this is a histogram. This white histogram shows you the range of value that's actually in the photo. So you can tell just by the fact that this is white, this is medium, and this is dark, that this is way on the dark side, way underexposed. So, and you have to be careful here too when you take an underexposed shot. If you try to bump up the value and bring that white highlight all the way to the end of this histogram, you blow out a lot of information in your shot. Yeah, that looks super high contrast, but if we zoom in, what we've really done here is we've kind of lost, I'm going to zoom in and move up. We've lost a lot of information in our white. We've totally blown it out. So I kind of want to show you what I mean by that. If you ever go in back into your layers and you want to look at your histogram again in a layer, you click on the icon, double click, and it opens up again. So here's what we had before, and we have information in our highlights right now, which means I can see texture, I can see value, I have pixels, right? When we make it super bright, we completely blow out that information. Now this might be what you're going for. You might be looking for like an radiated look in your image, which is fine, but you have to be intentionally looking for that. I am not. I want some information there. So I'm going to zoom back out again, which I'm holding Command plus or minus to do that. I'm going to just kind of mess around with my medium gray. And that way I'm bringing some information into the photo, into the shadows. Hi. Okay, bye. Thanks. But I'm not losing my contrast, which is really nice. And then my darks are already dark enough, right? I don't really want to make them any darker. I mean, mess around with it, but I'm still going for some realism here, some high contrast realism. So I'm going to mess around with that. I'm going to mess around with this a little bit, maybe even this a bit. It's your aesthetic. You have to find your aesthetic. Everyone has an aesthetic, and at some point you can even start making your own presets, which is like your own set of adjustments, and you call it something, and then you click on that preset, and all of a sudden all those changes are made automatically. A lot of photographers have their own personalized presets, and they get a certain look to all their photos by doing that. But that's more advanced. Okay, so I'm going to mess with my levels a little bit. So you have to ask yourself, well, how far do I want to go with this, right? How many adjustment layers do I need? So you could go in and you could do like a brightness contrast. But again, if I make it brighter, I'm blowing out my highlights. So just mess with it a little bit. It's a good idea to zoom in a bit too, just so you can see what it's doing. So, maybe I want to get a little bit more information in my shadows. So I'm going to drop that contrast down. So another thing I'm going to show you that's kind of cool is, well, if I've taken a photo that has a super high ISO and it's already grainy, what are some things I can do to it to kind of like capitalize on that grain? So I could go into the noise filter and I can add noise. So if I want to add noise, see this box here? Whatever's in this box is what you click on. So if you take this box out of here, like I can click on the eye, and I'm going to zoom out a bit. And oh, that's super. Why is it not showing up? That's weird. Usually when you click on the figure, you can see what you are clicking on. Let me try that again and figure out why it's not working. Sometimes this is a good lesson in Photoshop is there's always a reason why what you're doing isn't working, and I have to figure out why. Click on this. Oh, I know why. Because, see, there's always a reason. You just have to investigate. You have to be on the right layer in order to see what you're seeing. So I wasn't on the right layer. I was on this layer. I need to be on the working copy for this to work. So I'm going to go back into noise, and I'm going to add noise, and now it's working, right? Now I can click where I want to go and it takes me there. So I was looking at the eye, and there's some good contrast in here. So check it out. Just adding noise, whoa, I mean, you could blow it out so much that you don't even, and noise really is resolution, right? So the higher your ISO, the noisier your photo, the lower the cleaner. So you could take it all the way down and make it even smoother than it was before, or you could capitalize on the noise and kind of mess with that a little bit. Like me, it almost looks a little smoky, which is kind of thematic for right now too. So I'm going to choose something kind of in between. So these are the creative choices we can make in Photoshop. So now that I messed with the noise a little bit, I think I want to go back into my brightness and contrast and mess with the contrast a bit, maybe make it up it a bit, just because I lost a little bit of my contrast when I upped the noise. So now it's starting to look a little artsy, getting a little bit of an artsy image here. So that's all I wanted to really show you in terms of the black and white. So again, you do a few things before you save your images. Image size, and this is different in Photopea, but you already learned this. So image size, I never want it to be bigger than 10 inches on one side because it's just a massive file. Even as a JPEG, it's big. I like to keep my resolution 300 so that it stays sharp. And then hit OK, and it sometimes takes a second, and you can see it shrink. It's a smaller file. Now it got smaller. And then I go up to and I save as, and this is different than Photopea. So you're going to label it. You're going to leave the PSD part, and I'm going to go better shot Greninger, and I'm going to maybe do black and white. Desktop, and you're saving it as a Photoshop file, which is PSD. And then you're also saved, so I can see your layers. And then you're also saving it as a JPEG. So I'm just going to change the file format and save to desktop. I put them on the desktop so I can find them and then move them where I want them. Okay, so I'm going to continue this demo just for a few more minutes and show you if you wanted to do a color hue or a color cast to your photo instead. I took another photo of Mr. Vetter in the same situation, but I cropped in, so like more of a bust shot. So I'm going to drag that into Photoshop, and it's kind of the same shot, but I zoomed in a bit. Same thing, I had the same lighting situation, the same limitations, and then I knew I could kind of adjust in Photoshop. Again, high grainy, high noise, 1600 ISO. So I'm going to make my duplicate layer, working layer, and then I want to crop it. So first thing I'm going to do before I mess with the color is that I'm still going to create an adjustment layer where I turn down the saturation. Because I want to just put a simple color hue on the whole thing, it's really a lot easier for me to make it black and white first so that I can see what I'm doing when I'm adjusting the layers, the colors. Okay, so I've turned it way down and now it's black and white. All right, go back to my adjustment layers, and now I have a hue saturation adjustment layer to make it black and white. Next thing I want to do is mess with the levels because it is an underexposed photo. So I need to go back in, of course, again and brighten it up a little bit without losing and blowing out my highlights. So I'm messing with the medium toggle. So now I can see what I'm working with. The next thing is that I don't like the angle. I got the angle wrong when I took the shot. It's not straight, and that bothers me. So to adjust that, I can go up to crop, and up here when you put your cursor above this middle one, and even on the sides, anywhere really around it, you click on the outside and this grid shows up, and then you can use that grid to straighten up your photo. So I'm looking at the edge of the table. That's how I'm lining it up. Okay, and then you can also move your photo around within that shot. So I think I'm gonna, you have to keep it within the cropped shot because it changes the dimensions when you angle it. Okay, so I like that. And then I'm gonna hit return, and then now I have a little bit of weirdness down here. So I might want to do that one more time. Just possibly shrink this up a bit, up and in. Okay, so I got rid of that. So now I have a straighter, tighter shot. It looks pretty good as a black and white photo, but I want to mess with the color. So now I'm going to go up to color balance, which is this little scale. And I was thinking, gosh, you know, we've all been looking at this orange, horrible orange sunset for weeks now, and this orange sky. So I thought, well, what if I make it orange? So I'm going to pull in some red. These are so ominous. I need to brighten up my perspective here. But, you know, it's like artists are inspired by what's happening around them, and so you have to go with it. So I'm going to make this orange cast in the shot, which is really kind of interesting to me. And it looks sort of like a sepia photo now, a little bit older and more vintage. All right, that works. Okay, every time you make a change with the color or the levels, I kind of want to go back, and I want to mess with my let's see. I actually think I might want to mess with some contrast, which is this one. So I'm not gonna bump it up any because I don't want to blow out my whites, but I might want to make my darks a little darker, just a smidge. Yeah. Okay, so now you can see all your adjustment layers. Okay, so now something you can do is sharpen it. So to sharpen it, remember we learned this from the last one we did. We have to be on the right layer, and then we can go up to unsharp mask, and we learned how to do that already. And then we're going to click on the eye, and it's interesting. It shows you the original photo up here, not with your adjustments. So take it all the way over. You can see how grainy that gets. Maybe that's what you're going for. Maybe you like that. It doesn't really matter. If you're not printing your photo, you can really mess with that. Like you make it super smooth, which is like the beauty filter, right? Or you could take it way up. I'm going to make it a little sharper, but not by much. And then again, you can mess with the filters. You know, if I go up to filter, I can mess with the noise again. I can make it look kind of like dusty and speckly and kind of, you know, woo. Don't want. Oh, this fixes the dust and the scratches. So mess with these things, you know, like now he looks like he's kind of underwater. Don't go too crazy, right? I don't like that one though, so I want to go back and mess with all of them. You know, what happens? What happens when we distort with a ripple? It doesn't seem to want to work on this one. Here we go. Oh, here we go. So we don't see, we only see it up here. So that just looks weird. You know, certain things just look cheesy. But I guess that's up for you to decide. So you could add like a lens blur, motion blur, you know, really just, I don't know, play around with these things. Yeah, so you could get in here and there's all these settings, you know, your radius. I mean, this is where we can get into some fun stuff. And we can, you know, when you guys learn how to make selections later on, you could blur part of your photo and you could make the other part sharp. You know, there's so much potential here. So, but we're not going to go that crazy with it. I just wanted to sharpen it a little bit and possibly give it a little bit of noise. Because I'm going for that hazy look. So, you know, play around with these. What is the difference between Gaussian and uniform? I think that has to do with how the pixels are scrambled, but that's my only guess. So I'll mess around with that a little bit. And again, if I mess with the noise, making it look a little smoky, then I'm going to go back in to my brightness contrast, and I'm probably going to up the contrast again because I don't want to lose my contrast. Okay, so that's that. I'm gonna remember we're gonna change the size. This is a huge photo. We want to make this 10 inches on the longest side, and we're gonna save as a PSD. I'm gonna say better crop shot, and then we're gonna say color cast. You know, these are just things I'm making up. You can name it whatever you want. And then I'm going to save it as a JPEG. And then I've got these things on my desktop, and I can dump them into a Drive folder and share the link with Miss Greninger. All right, so that's how you manipulate a basic photo to make it a little bit more artsy and maybe even a high fashion shot. If you're shooting a subject that is interested in fashion and you're using props and makeup and stuff, you can go for it. Mr. Vetter is not necessarily, he didn't want to be a high fashion model in this shot, so I went for something realistic and kind of photojournalistic for these shots. So, all right, thanks for listening.